The bull went missing for 3 months, then returned with a piece of the missing boy's shirt. Caleb Thorne vanished on a clear October afternoon. Joel saw him last, no more than 50 yards away, near the back edge of the pasture, where the tree line sloped downward into the dense woods. Caleb had turned, grinning as he hoisted an armful of split kindling, the sun catching in his copper-colored hair. Joel waved back, distracted by the chore of fixing the gate hinge that had come loose that morning. In hindsight, it was a trivial thing to be focused on. Caleb had said he'd be back in 20 minutes. He never came back. At first, Joel thought his brother might have wandered deeper in search of dry branches. It wasn't like Caleb to take long, but it also wasn't like him to get lost. The boy knew those woods better than most of the grown men in Red Marsh Hollow. When half an hour passed, then a full hour, Joel began calling out. He dropped his tools, walked into the woods, shouting his brother's name louder each time. The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows through the oaks. A breeze picked up, fluttering the leaves like whispers. There was no answer. By nightfall, Joel had roused the entire village. They came with lanterns and flashlights, dogs and rifles, forming lines to search the forest. Some of the older men brought sticks to tap the ground near the riverbanks. Ewan Thorne, their father, stomped through the trees in silence, his face pale, jaw tight. The villagers combed every path, every hill, even the marsh past Red Pike's crossing. They found nothing. Not a single broken branch, not one footprint, not a button, a torn thread, or even a dropped stick of kindling. It was as if the earth had swallowed Caleb whole. By the third day, the search became quiet. Lanterns grew fewer. The dogs stopped barking. The sheriff, a quiet man named Tobin Hale, called for a pause in the search until more information surfaced. "We've scoured every inch," he said, not meeting Joel's eyes. "It's like he just vanished." Joel refused to stop. Every morning he rose before dawn, packed bread and water, and walked into the forest. His boots grew stained with mud and frost. His hands blistered from pulling away brush. Every crow call made him whip around. Every snapping twig sent a chill crawling down his spine. But Caleb never answered. Then Bramble disappeared. Their bull, enormous, black-furred, and near legendary in the region, had vanished the same night the sheriff closed the official search. Some villagers joked he'd gone looking for the boy himself. Others muttered about wolves. But Joel knew the truth. Bramble was Caleb's shadow. That bull had followed the boy into town, into the woods, even into the shallows of Red Marsh River once. If Caleb had gone deeper into the forest, Bramble had likely followed, or tried to. Ewan didn't speak much after that. Joel heard him crying once, deep in the barn, his sobs muffled by hay. Their father, once so stern and unshakable, began sleeping in his chair by the window. He kept Caleb's muddy boots beside the door. The frost came early that year. By November, the village of Red Marsh Hollow had become quiet, heavy with waiting. Boys were kept indoors. The forest was avoided. Rumors spread, talk of sinkholes, poachers, mountain cats. But the truth, the unspoken truth, was that something had taken a child, and no one knew what. Joel grew lean and tired. He stopped shaving. He marked the trees with chalk as he moved deeper into the forest each day. The village began to look at him with pity, then worry. Some asked if he was still eating. Others asked if he'd seen things out there. But Joel only shook his head. He had one goal left, to find his brother, alive or dead. And then, 3 months after Caleb disappeared, Bramble came home. It was early morning. Frost still clung to the grass, and mist drifted low across the pasture. Joel had just stepped outside, carrying a pail of feed for the remaining livestock, when he heard the low, wheezing grunt of something large. He turned toward the fence. Bramble stood near the edge of the pasture, just beyond the gate. His massive head hung low, steam curling from his nostrils. His coat was matted with mud and brambles. Deep scratches marked his flanks, and one of his hooves dragged slightly as he stepped forward. Joel dropped the pail. "Bramble?" he said quietly, walking forward, his breath visible in the cold air. The bull looked up. His eyes were sunken, rimmed with crusted red. But he did not shy away. Slowly, painfully, he limped forward, stopping a few feet from Joel. Then Joel saw it. Wrapped around one of Bramble's horns, tangled in the curve, was a scrap of blue fabric. Small, frayed on one side, torn clean on the other. The color was unmistakable. Joel's legs buckled and he fell to his knees, hands shaking as he reached out. He tugged the cloth free and held it in his palm. It was part of Caleb's shirt, the same one he'd worn the day he vanished, a pale blue checkered cotton with dark stitching. Joel stared at it, chest heaving. It wasn't faded, not rotten, not weather-worn. The cloth was damp, and there was a smear of something dark near the edge. Mud, maybe, or dried blood. "Where did you go, Bramble?" Joel whispered. The bull gave a soft grunt and lowered his head, pressing gently against Joel's shoulder. It was the gentlest touch Joel had ever felt from him. Inside the house, Ewan rose from the kitchen table and looked out the window. When he saw the bull, he opened the door, but did not speak. He only watched, his eyes darting between Bramble and the fabric in Joel's hand. Joel stood slowly, his jaw clenched. "This wasn't from 3 months ago," he said, his voice low but certain. "This cloth, it's fresh." Ewan said nothing. The wind picked up, stirring the frost-covered grass. Birds scattered from the treetops, and somewhere in the far distance, deep within the woods, a low howl echoed once and faded. Joel looked toward the trees. Caleb might still be alive. Joel strapped the satchel over his shoulder, tightened the laces of his boots, and cinched the leather harness around Bramble's chest. The frost had barely melted off the grass, but he wasn't waiting for the sheriff or anyone else. Not after seeing the scrap of Caleb's shirt. That wasn't just a clue. It was a message. Bramble hadn't come home by accident. Something had led him back, and Joel wasn't going to waste another second. He didn't tell his father. Ewan had barely spoken since Bramble returned. He sat in the parlor most nights, staring at the fireplace like it held the answer to a question too painful to ask aloud. Joel left a note, tucked into the corner of the kitchen table, and stepped into the early morning fog. Bramble moved slowly at first, still limping, but with a strange urgency in his steps. Joel followed him past the pasture, down the frost-hardened trail, and into the woods that had haunted his dreams for months. As they pushed deeper, Joel realized Bramble wasn't taking any known trail. The bull ignored familiar bends and flattened paths, instead forging into thicker brush, weaving through trees warped by years of wind. The woods changed as they moved. The air grew denser, colder, and the light dimmed, though the sky above was still bright with morning. The deeper they went, the more the forest seemed to lean inward, like it was listening. Hours passed. Joel lost track of time. His legs ached. Thorns scraped his arms. The sun hung low, casting long orange streaks across the undergrowth. Then he noticed the smell. At first it was faint, wet moss and rotting bark. But the deeper they walked, the stronger it became. Damp metal, old blood, the kind of scent that made Joel's stomach turn. Bramble snorted and slowed. Joel placed a hand on the bull's flank, steadying both of them. That's when the trees parted. They stood at the edge of a narrow valley, almost a ravine. It was carved deep between cliffs of black stone, as if something ancient had dragged its claws through the land. Moss clung to the walls, vines twisted down like grasping fingers. At the bottom, scattered across a bed of dirt and moss, lay bones. Dozens of them, some bleached, others fresh, still marked with reddish stains. Joel's heart pounded as he stepped forward, eyes darting across the scene. Goat skulls, deer antlers, a cow's jawbone, and smaller bones, brittle and thin, that made his stomach lurch. Bramble shifted uneasily, grunting low in his throat. Joel scanned the valley until something caught his eye near the far end. A structure, half hidden beneath an outcropping. It wasn't natural. A crude hut, woven from twisted branches, dried hides, and bone. Smoke rose from a hole in the roof, thin and gray. Joel crouched behind a tree, watching. No movement. He stepped slowly down the incline, every leaf crackling underfoot sounding like thunder in the stillness. Bramble stayed behind, pacing restlessly at the ridge. Joel reached the hut and edged closer. The smell was stronger here, smoke, meat, and something sweet but spoiled. He ducked behind a boulder and peered through a gap in the wall. A man sat inside, cross-legged beside a dim fire. Or at least, Joel thought it was a man. He was thin to the point of skeletal, with skin so pale it almost glowed in the firelight. A beard matted with dirt hung down his chest, and his eyes, cloudy, milky white, moved strangely, as if they tracked something only he could see. He hummed softly, a tuneless sound, as he carved lines into a flat stone with the edge of a bone. Symbols, runes, or something worse. Joel's breath caught in his throat. Then he saw it. The man reached under a shelf, took a dented metal plate, and slid it through a narrow wooden slot in the floor. He waited. A few moments later, he pulled it back. Empty. Joel stared at the slot. Something, or someone, was beneath the hut. His heart hammered. Every instinct screamed at him to run, but his legs refused to move. Could Caleb be down there? Was this how he had survived all this time? He edged around the hut, searching for an opening, a hatch, a cellar door. Nothing. Just thick brush and sharp thorns. The man inside continued humming. Joel took a step closer. His boot found a dry branch. It snapped with a loud crack. The man's humming stopped. Joel froze. Inside, the man's head turned sharply, too quickly, like a bird sensing danger. He sniffed the air. "You shouldn't be here," the man said. His voice was slow and heavy, as though unused to speech. He reached under the table. Joel didn't wait to see what he grabbed. He turned and sprinted up the slope, heart racing, lungs burning. Behind him, the hut creaked, and something scraped against wood. Bramble met him at the ridge, ears back, muscles tensed. "Go!" Joel hissed, slapping his flank. The bull didn't need more urging. Together they crashed through the undergrowth, twigs snapping, vines whipping across their faces. Joel didn't stop until the stench faded, until the forest widened again, until the light felt real and the ground was solid beneath his feet. They didn't reach home that night. Joel set up camp near a dried creek bed. Bramble stood guard while Joel built a small fire. His hands trembled as he unrolled his blanket, but he didn't sleep. Instead, he wrote. He took out the small leather notebook Caleb had once given him and recorded everything. The valley, the bones, the hut, the man, the plate, the slot in the floor. He sketched the strange runes he remembered from the stone. He wrote every detail twice, afraid that memory alone wouldn't be enough. This wasn't just a rescue. It was something else, something darker, something that didn't belong in the world he knew. He thought about the pale man's eyes, how they seemed both blind and all-seeing. He remembered the way Bramble had reacted, not with fear, but caution. As if the bull had been here before. As if he understood what Joel didn't. That hut wasn't just a hiding place. It was a door. Joel stared into the dying fire, its glow casting long shadows through the trees. His heartbeat had slowed, but his mind raced. He couldn't do this alone. Whatever was down there, whatever had taken Caleb, wasn't human. And he'd need help. And he'd need help. Joel placed the torn blue cloth on the table between them, the edges frayed and still carrying a faint, damp scent of moss. "This is all I have," he said quietly. But it came back with Bramble. And Bramble doesn't lie. Across from him sat Bram Carver, the former woodsman with arms like carved oak and a beard streaked with iron gray. His hands were rough, fingers curled slightly from old breaks, but steady as he lifted the fabric and turned it in the firelight. He didn't speak for a moment. His face remained unreadable. Beside him, Father Ellis folded his hands tightly, his eyes downcast. The priest was younger than Bram, but older than Joel, with deep lines of fatigue under his eyes, the kind that came from knowing too much. He still wore the dark wool of his station, though the collar was worn and the sleeves mended. He said softly, "The boy is alive, isn't he?" "I saw where Bramble took me," Joel said, voice thick. "There's something out there. A valley hidden in the cliffs, bones everywhere. A hut. A man, if you can call him that. He fed something beneath the floor. There was a trapdoor, symbols carved into stone." Bram finally looked up, his pale blue eyes locked with Joel's. "You say the bull led you to it?" Joel nodded, like he'd done it before. Bram stood without a word and moved to his bookshelf. Dust lifted in a cloud as he pulled down an old, leather-bound atlas. The cover cracked like old bark when he opened it. He flipped through pages until he reached a faded map of the forested region beyond Redmarsh Hollow. It was crude, drawn by hand, with few names. He tapped a blank space near the cliffs with a thick finger. "This here," Bram said, "used to be called Hollow's Rest. Places cursed in every tongue that's touched these woods. They say bad things lived there. Old things." Joel frowned. "Stories?" "Warnings," Bram replied. "My grandfather said no game would cross that valley. Trees rot faster. You dig there, earth fights you. Something waits." Father Ellis cleared his throat. "There are legends," he said, reluctant. "The below men, figures who served, things beneath the ground, not quite human. They'd offer up the weak, the young. Some said they fed children to whatever lived below, to keep the rest of the valley safe." Joel stared at them both. "I didn't want to believe it," he said, rubbing his temples. "But the way that man moved, like he wasn't seeing me, but something through me. And the bones, they weren't all animals." The priest made the sign of the cross, but his fingers trembled slightly. They planned for 2 days. Joel brought rope, torches, a hammer, and a hand-forged hunting knife. Bram packed climbing hooks, a spade, and a small hatchet he'd sharpened to a shine. Father Ellis carried a flask of holy water, his grandfather's iron crucifix, and a thick canvas satchel filled with herbs, candles, and salt. He didn't say what it was all for. Bramble refused to be left behind. Joel tried to keep him stabled, but the bull broke the latch on the barn and followed them halfway through town before Joel gave in. His limp was better now, and something in his eyes burned with the quiet fury of memory. Joel didn't know how Bramble had survived 3 months in that cursed valley, but maybe he hadn't just survived. Maybe he had watched, learned. They left before dawn, passing beneath trees that creaked in the windless dark. The journey was long, slow, and silent. No birds sang, no squirrels darted. Even the wind seemed reluctant to stir. As they reached the edge of the cliffs, the forest seemed to fall away, and the land changed. Joel saw it again, the steep drop, the bones scattered like seeds, the twisted black cliffs standing like broken teeth. The hut still stood, half hidden under the overhang. But it was empty. No fire, no movement. The strange humming Joel had heard before was gone. In its place was silence so deep it felt alive. They stepped inside carefully. Joel led the way, Bram behind him with the hatchet ready, and Father Ellis murmuring prayers under his breath. The room was cleared. No carvings, no stone. Just dirt, ash, and a thick layer of dust. But near the far wall, the floor had changed. There was a trapdoor. Rough wood, bound with old metal hinges, slightly ajar. Joel's stomach twisted. He exchanged a look with Bram, then nodded. They opened it. A tunnel stretched down, stone walls slick with moisture, the air thick and cold. Joel lit a torch. The flame flickered low, casting long shadows as they began their descent. The tunnel twisted. The walls grew tighter. Strange shapes had been etched into the stone, some in chalk, others in something darker. Joel's fingers brushed them as they passed, sharp symbols, spirals, and marks like claws. Then came the sounds, soft thuds, breathing that didn't belong to them, whispers just beneath understanding. Joel couldn't tell if they came from ahead or behind. Father Ellis pressed the crucifix to his chest and kept whispering prayers. Bramble's hooves echoed like drums, steady and unfazed. After what felt like an hour, the tunnel opened into a vast chamber. Joel gasped. The ceiling stretched higher than the church steeple, carved in rough arches. Blue fungus clung to the stone, glowing faintly, casting a cold, sickly light. The floor was uneven, pitted with holes. Chains hung from the rock like vines. And in the center, inside a cage made from twisted metal and bones, was Caleb, alive. Joel dropped the torch and ran. "Caleb!" he shouted. The boy stirred. His face was pale, thinner, but not broken. He blinked slowly, squinting through the light. "Joel?" he croaked. Joel smashed the lock with his knife hilt and flung the door open. He grabbed his brother and held him tight, tears stinging his eyes. "I've got you," he said. "I've got you now." But Caleb gripped his shirt weakly and whispered, "It's not over. It wakes when it smells fear." Joel pulled back. "What wakes?" A deep sound echoed through the chamber. Behind them, from the far wall, something moved. Stone cracked. Dust rained down. A shape emerged, massive, crawling, ancient. Not a man, not an animal. It dragged itself out of the wall like it had been part of the stone, made of roots, bone, and shadows. It had no face, but it looked at them. Bram stepped forward, hatchet raised. "Get the boy out," he said. "Now." Joel hesitated, staring at the creature. It opened something like a mouth, a split in the middle of its form, and let out a sound that turned his stomach. Then Bramble stepped in front of them. The bull lowered his head. His nostrils flared, and from deep inside him came a snort, not of fear, but challenge. His hooves stamped the ground, and then he charged. Joel's boots slammed against the cold, damp stone as he sprinted through the tunnel, his arms locked tight around Caleb's limp body. Each breath burned in his chest, and every step sent a jolt of pain up his legs. Behind him, the dark echoed with unearthly howls, guttural, rising like a twisted choir from the depths. Father Ellis ran beside him, clutching a torch that flickered madly in the stale air, casting shadows that danced like clawed hands across the jagged walls. The priest's voice trembled as he muttered Latin prayers under his breath, as if the ancient words could still hold back whatever was chasing them. Bramble was still fighting. Joel could hear it, hooves smashing against stone, snorts of fury, and the thunderous sound of impact as the bull hurled itself at the creature in the dark. It wasn't just rage. There was something in Bramble's cries that felt mournful, final. Joel dared a glance back over his shoulder just in time to see Bram, one arm slick with blood, lunge forward with a broken spear in hand, shouting something Joel couldn't make out. Behind him, Bramble reared, horns glinting in the flicker of torchlight, before charging full force into the shadows. Then the ceiling cracked. A deafening rumble filled the tunnel. The ground buckled. Stone rained from above in thick, choking clouds. Joel's feet slipped, and he nearly fell, but Father Ellis grabbed his arm, hauling him forward. Joel screamed Bram's name, but it was swallowed by the collapsing corridor. The earth roared, and the entrance behind them folded inward, a tidal wave of dust and stone sealing away whatever lay beneath the hill, along with the two who never came back out. They burst into the open night, coughing and stumbling, their faces pale and streaked with grime. Joel dropped to his knees in the wet grass, holding Caleb close. The boy stirred, groaning faintly, his eyes fluttering open. "I've got you," Joel whispered, his voice hoarse. "You're safe now. You're safe." The flames of Father Ellis's torch hissed in the mist, casting a warm orange glow that looked small and fragile beneath the stars. The priest sank to his knees beside them, his face aged years and minutes, eyes fixed on the now silent hill.